Hey everybody.
Hello, hello.
Sorry, we're a couple minutes late. I was running a little late, just stuffing myself with Thanksgiving leftovers real quick. Uh so we got there. We got there in the end. Um but yeah, so
Yeah, I'm doing the
here
same
we
thing as
are.
we speak. It's not, I'll try and do it off mic. It's not Thanksgiving leftovers, but similar story.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man. But yeah, so here we are.
Hey, Warwicks.
Hey Works, what's
Warwick's
up?
in the chat there.
How have things been, Jason? I know you're probably eating still, but
Yeah, um, trying to. All these questions, Andrew. Uh, no, things are good. It's getting wintry. I'm still wearing a coat.
Ah,
Um,
yeah, very good. Yeah, it's mostly been like I would say wet around here for the last like week or so. It's been like
hmm,
steadily raining pretty much. So it's mostly just been that. It's pretty cold. Relatively so at least. It's been under freezing quite a few times, but it's like I wish the weather would make up its mind because it was like pushing to as I pull up my Fahrenheit to Celsius calculator right here. I will eventually figure out how to do that calculation in my head, but
freezing is 0, if that's a
yeah,
helpful
but
reference
that's
point.
that's the only thing I know. I know that freezing is 0, which is such a nice number instead of
Hmm,
32. Who decided that was a great idea? Not nobody. Nobody did that. Although it is good for that, which is 100 is like really hot. So like 100 degrees Fahrenheit is like really hot, like
hmm,
starting to be where you don't really want to be outside like at all. So um but yeah, what was it? 60
yeah,
degrees Fahrenheit
I'm
is
sure there's
like
a story behind
I'm
where the
sure
0
there
is on that
is,
scale.
but
What was Mr. Fahrenheit thinking?
I have no idea. But I am glad that Works can play today so he can Works wants to Do you want to push around some corpses today? Cuz that's what this patch is. We pulled we pulled a darkest dungeon and we decided to against our better judgment mess around with corpses. So apparently that was a very very I would say not entirely well received when they introduced corpses being like a hazard on the battlefield that you could destroy in Darkest Dungeon. Like the
Yeah,
community was very split.
that was a whole big controversy, I think, because all of the strats that people had found very dominant strategies, which were kind of
Yeah.
broken by corpses, and it seems like in the end it was a kind of good design decision because they just blocked out some kind of cheesy, uninteresting like power strats. But
Yeah.
obviously, it also destroyed everyone's strats, so they were kind of understandably annoyed about that. So
Yeah, but it wasn't like the game was like officially released or anything. I would say I would be a little bit maybe I wouldn't even be peeved because it was like it's just like the game changes for everyone. And
yeah,
unless someone was like in the middle of a run and then it got patched and they couldn't complete that run, then like sure, whatever. But I mean the games change like well video games do at least. They change, they adapt, whatever. So I remember when I played, I was not particularly upset by the corpses. So although I didn't really have a frame of reference either, so it was just like, yeah, this is fine. This works for me. This is all right.
yeah. I think I first played after the corpses were already in there, and it seemed totally natural. So
Yeah, it was fine. It was I was absolutely fine.
whether
uh,
our decision to enable this stuff is sensible
yeah,
or not, it kind of remains to be seen.
I don't
I feel like
know.
this. I feel like this is just some shenanigans we put in there because it was
Yeah,
fun.
probably. Well, also it's not like super well bug tested at this point. Like we did some testing and we found some funny stuff, but there I'm not I would say there wasn't like a right answer to why it was wrong.
Mm.
Like there are a couple of interpretations on how you could possibly quote fix it. Uh or rather, I guess in our case mostly, it's make the behavior more predictable, or like along the lines of what you would hope it would do, essentially,
Hmm.
when interacting with corpses. And when we say interact, it's basically moving them around. There's only a couple of abilities that allow you to do that right now, which I'll go over in the patch notes in a couple of
Yep.
minutes. But yeah, so
Yeah. Speaking of bugs, there's one I'm aware of which is still in there, which is some of the tile highlights. Like when you choose an ability and then choose a target, it highlights the tiles which will be affected. Some of those aren't quite right in some of the edge cases where
oh,
enforced.
okay.
So be aware that if you're hitting somebody who's on your side of the battlefield and they're going to be cannoned over to the other side, then it may not uh, highlight things correctly. But for the most part,
Yeah,
it should kind of do what you expect in terms of it's going to fly forward into the first thing that gets in its way.
that's the hope at least. So that is definitely the hope. But yeah, so we've got that going on today. To yeah, that's. I think we should probably get into the notes probably at this
Yep,
point. Why
let's do
not?
it.
Why not? Oh, notes. Boom. Okay, so did a few things here. The first bullet point is basically, hey, yeah, we did new terrain layouts. So we did. So one of there was I wouldn't call it like an issue, but there was kind of like an interesting kind of thing that happened. I think last tournament or not tournament, but last play session / whatever. Um, I think there were like maybe too many health pickups on one of the
Hmm.
maps. So it kind of like dragged out the match a little bit longer than we would have liked to. It's always interesting when you introduce new terrain objects, how they interact with not only like how characters interact with them on like an instance to instance kind of basis, but also how they, interact with the flow of battle and the overall
Yeah.
length and interactivity and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of took another crack at different layouts, basically. So you'll be seeing new ones today. These next two bullet points here are basically what we hinted at before a little bit, and two abilities can now interact with knocked out characters. So specifically, the Engineer's Arm Hook and the Warrior's Shove. You can target knocked out characters. Obviously, it's not going to do damage to that particular character because they're already knocked out. But they can move knocked out characters to different tiles. So the Arm Hook, as the Arm Hook does, can move a knocked out character to an adjacent tile.
Mhm.
So that's good. And also the Warrior Shove will shove characters until they hit something, basically. But it also will do damage to if it hits a character as well. Like not your target, but the character that your target would knock into still does that damage. So there are some edge cases where that is very useful, but I would say that a very good purpose of these, a very good use case is either covering tiles that have beneficial buffs for your opponent,
Mm.
or getting characters off of negative tiles, basically. So if a character gets knocked out on a corrupted tile, you can move them off the corrupted tile and then get someone else on there at some point. So these are can be very useful in some very specific circumstances. It's a little bit more difficult for the warrior to take advantage of this because, well, shove is a focus ability, so it's a little bit more difficult for them to get
Well,
that wound up. But
it gives him a ranged attack, I suppose.
it also gives them a ranged attack in a way. That is very true. The warrior does have one big flaw, and the warrior cannot do ranged attack damage at all. So this kind of, in very specific circumstances, gives them a ranged projectile in the form of a knocked out character, basically. So there is a little way around that now. So if you're if you're playing against a warrior in a 1v1 situation at the end of the game, and that's the only character, and you have a character that can say levitate or something like that, don't be behind a corpse, basically. Like, don't do that, because you can get hit by that. But other than that, yeah, that's mostly what's going on here. This was kind of just us messing around and saying why not.
Yeah, I
So
think the I
yeah,
think the spark for this was in the previous playtesting session. We had a situation where I think it was one of my matches actually. I used the arm hook on somebody, and
yes,
it it KO'd them and ended up not moving them. That's kind of how that used to work. So we thought, oh,
yep,
probably if the hit knocks them out, it should still move them as well. And then that extended too well. Why don't we just let it target
yeah,
KO'd characters from the get-go? I would say of the two of these changes, the engineer's arm hook one definitely seems the most sensible, and there's the highest probability this will actually remain in the game after
sure,
this patch. Um, yeah, there's definitely some uses for that. Another one, you kind of mentioned a couple of potential benefits. Another one is you can kind of influence the spawning of other objects, like the heals, like the falling debris, because those somewhat depend on, some of those can't spawn on a tile where there's a character, so you can somehow influence where some of that stuff spawns sometimes as well.
could be really cheeky and pull a knocked out character onto a health spawn, and it won't respawn because they
Yeah,
can't
that's
take
true.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Um, Interestingly, when I was first testing this, I hadn't accounted for that edge case, and pulling a knocked out character onto the health spawn would re-up them, and they would they would get healed and just pop straight back up.
that's
Um,
actually incredible.
I removed that, so I believe it will just they won't be able to collect it if they're knocked out. I
Okay,
think that's how.
fair enough. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I was not aware of that. That could have been very, very interesting. Very
Yeah, I mean,
wary of bringing characters into the fold that can somehow, even inadvertently, resurrect characters. That's a very, yeah. I'm
it's
not
game
gonna rule
changing,
that.
right? Yeah.
I'm not gonna rule that out necessarily, especially if it's behind like a focus ability. Uh, like, because the game does have a small issue of comeback mechanics.
Mm.
So when we first started doing this, there was like a rule that was just like, nah, let's not resurrect characters because we have no idea how that's going to influence the game and blah blah blah. But the more that we come into these circumstances where overwhelmingly the player that gets the first knockout eventually wins, I think that's been balanced a little bit better now. Definitely in the in the past like few months, I would say,
Mm.
to like maybe about like half a year at this point. Like that's been a lot better.
Yeah.
But
I'd have to
yeah,
check the latest stats. Like they always used to hover like 80+% of the time. If you got
yep.
the first KO, you would win. Yeah, I haven't checked the stat. I feel like that's lower now. Maybe it's
I would
like
hope it.
70 or something. But
I would hope it is, but at this point, I am okay with bringing a character back. I'm okay with that as long as it's balanced, where like the character has like 10 health left or something like that. I think that would be okay as long as it's
yeah, it'd be
locked
bringing
behind a
them back
focus
for
ability.
like one last hurrah, right? Like one last big move or something.
Yeah, either they have like a countdown timer on their turns, basically, or they're brought back with very low health so they can just, if the turn order is funky, they can just get knocked out or whatever. Because that's a very powerful move, and it can really swing things back.
Mm.
But I think that's okay at this point because I think like one of the comeback mechanics that we introduced originally was that last one standing. Because that allowed a player that had one character left to have some additional output on that character so that they could potentially like even it up a little quicker.
Yeah.
But I'm I'm even more okay with that res now because it would remove the last one standing bonus if you were the last one.
Ah.
So
Yeah,
I
good
think,
point. Yeah.
yeah, because I was thinking about like, oh, if you're in a 1v1 situation, both of you have the last one standing bonus. But if you res someone on your team to make it a 2v1, you would lose that bonus. So I'm okay with that, actually. We'll put that in
Yeah,
the we'll put that in the fridge somewhere. I think it would be very dangerous, but that might be all right if balanced accordingly.
yeah, because it would be the kind of thing you only wanted to do,
Yeah,
like in a specific situation. It would be a very highly situational thing that it would even be worth taking your whole turn to res somebody so they could get
yeah,
maybe one turn. Yeah.
yeah. It'd be difficult, but I think we could probably work it out. I think that's an
Yeah.
exciting thing that we can model a character around. I think
Yeah,
it's
actually,
possible
I
at least.
I do think one of the very, very early prototypes did have some form of res, and I believe it was a stance. Like you had to um,
Oh, you had to be
go
like
into a stance
behind.
targeting a character. Yeah, and if you
Yeah,
moved or if you got interrupted, then it would like interrupt
yeah.
the res.
I think it was like if you got attacked or something, it would stop the res before your next turn. So yeah, nah, totally. Yeah, we've had stuff like that floating around, but I think it would be worth revisiting at some point. So because I'm all for getting some more comeback mechanics in the game, and
Hmm.
if that's one of them, then that's totally fine. But yeah, just gotta properly balance it around it. Give it a cost, make it less like universally applicable, all that kind of stuff. There's so many ways to balance that uh, type of mechanic. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, just one last thing to round out this little feature list here. There were some funny uh, character jump animations that were going on, but those should be good now.
Yeah, so that was you'd notice if you like shoved somebody, they would actually just jump to wherever you push them. That's kind of
Yeah,
how it's always worked behind the scenes. And our newer characters, our prototype characters, have more jump animations, so they would kind of behave differently.
yeah.
And that's now been updated. So if somebody's forcefully moved, they don't jump; they just stay in whatever stance they're in and just kind of slide around, basically. So it just looks visually a bit more sensible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with all of the corpse shoving, that kind of became necessary because the corpses would stand up, jump to their destination tile, and then politely lie back down again. So
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, excuse me, pardon me. Like, I'll get to that.
yeah,
Sorry about that. Anything for you." But yeah, so that's about it for patch notes. So yeah,
yeah, I think so.
uh, but yeah, we're just gonna probably chill for a few minutes. Once it hits that even hour mark, and then we'll do some matches and.
So before the stream, you were just telling me you've been binging a game recently.
Oh, yeah. Well, multiple ones, but the one that yeah, we've been playing Terraria again. My partner played through Terraria with a friend before, like all the way through, basically. Um, and if you're not familiar with Terraria, basically 2D Minecraft, essentially. But it's one of those games that feels like, gosh, I think it's been technically it was in development for like 10 years, kind of something like that.
Hmm.
It was just like continuously in early access, but like they just added stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff. It just feels like one of those games where it felt like a more of a modding community than anything. Like
Mm.
it felt like the actual developers were modders than actual developers
Yeah.
because there's just so many things and like so many like niche things that could happen and like kind of like weird loot tables off of different bosses. Yeah, there's bosses, by the way. It's a big thing in that game. But like if you go from what like the beginning game looks like versus what the end game looks like what you're doing, it's you play the game completely differently. It's
Mm.
insane. Just like because like in the beginning, like I don't think I'm giving away any spoilers because it's just like how you do combat, but like in the beginning you're just like walking around and you've got like a sword, or if you're lucky you have like a bow and arrow, and you're just kind of on this like 2D plane digging and attacking enemies and stuff like that or whatever. But I will say we did the end boss last night, and we were flying around in UFOs, and I had a magic Gatling gun and infinite mana. Uh Yeah, it was insane. Like, it just goes crazy. Like, that game just goes on and on and on and just gets more and more ridiculous. And the stuff that they added to there, there's just like there's so many things. Well, I can't even begin to explain. But
Did they manage to keep it understandable for new players?
uh yeah,
Like, are you
but
isolated from that craziness as you're starting to
yes, you're
play?
definitely isolated from the craziness in the beginning because there's like different like zones that you can be in. And there's some things that happen to tick the game over into what they call, I think it's called like hardcore mode, basically. Like after you beat a certain boss, something happens in the world, which I'll not give it away, but everything also gets a lot harder to fight. And you basically fight all those bosses again. But then after you fight all the same bosses again, it goes to like there's way more stuff, basically. So there's like yeah, it's trying to think of a way to describe it, but like in the beginning, like the only way that you find bosses is by digging deep enough in certain biomes, and you'll eventually hit them. But the game doesn't tell you how you summon the bosses. Like you'll do it by accident sometimes, and you'll be like, oh crap, I did not want to do this yet. But you know, it's just part of it. So I will say that we all play the game with the wiki open at this point because we are just so far into the game that like we're just trying to figure out how to get the best gear. And some of the way to get that is a little obtuse. So
Mhm.
the game also has what I will call the worst crafting menu in a game that I've ever seen in my entire life. Also, because that crafting menu is in the same menu as your inventory menu, which is mapped to your escape key. The only way, because it like when you press the escape key, it opens up your inventory and your crafting menu, which the crafting menu only allows you to craft things if you have the correct items in your inventory.
Okay.
It doesn't have a menu that saves things that you've already made, so you know how to make them. So if you just don't have the stuff in your inventory, it won't tell you that you can make stuff, even if you made
Oh,
it
okay.
before. So like that's the reason why we keep the wiki open, because it's like, well, it doesn't have a catalog in the game, so like even if I like, you know, even if I know what I want to make, I don't know exactly how to make it because it's not telling me like it won't remember anything. So I
Hmm.
think the game has a little jank around it, and like the only way
Are
to
you
get
telling
to
me? Are you telling me you might have to write stuff down?
well, it's not even writing stuff down. There's just so many things going on that it's hard to keep track of stuff.
Okay. So you have like
Like
a wiki page open in
yeah, I
another
usually
tab or
have a
something.
wiki page open just to be like, oh, okay, like I want to get this. How do I get this? Like I have no idea how to do this because there's just it's so huge.
Hmm.
And at this point, we just wanted to like beat bosses at this point.
Yeah.
So we're just like, okay, like I want to make sure that I have the best gear before going on to this boss. Like, what do I gotta do? And I feel that's fine because that's kind of how I feel the game should be played because it's just so massive. You would just waste so much time like not knowing how to get anything. Um, and the game is like heavily gear dependent. So some bosses will just pretty much be almost impossible if you don't have like some of the best gear up to that point. So I find it enjoyable trying to like min max my character's like
Yeah.
gear and stuff like that. But I can't imagine playing that game entirely like with no assistance.
Yeah.
So but yeah, it's
Oh,
a good time.
Paul asked you how your Thanksgiving's been, by the way.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I was gonna say, Jason, how was yours? But you don't have one, so.
Nope.
It was good. I had my mom over, and that's it because of COVID. So we had one additional person. That's it.
Is that the rule? Is that what you're allowed then?
There's no rules really. Well, okay, correction. There are rules. I think right now Gosh, it varies from state to state, but I think our rules right now is that you can't have any gatherings of 10 or more people, I believe.
Okay.
Actually, no, that's not true. Technically now, very specifically now, you're not supposed to have anyone who you do not live with, basically, in your
Mm.
household. Um, the reason why we kind of broke that a little bit is because we don't see anybody, and I
Yeah.
see my mom pretty regularly, like every other week, I would say,
Hmm.
and she doesn't see anybody either. So it's like it's whatever.
Yeah, we have a system called like a bubble, which kind of covers those
Okay, yeah.
cases. So there's some like exemption for that.
Yeah, so I mean that's pretty much it. That was very very recent that they changed that rule for my state. We're on like a, I don't know what they call it, a pause, I think they called it or something, which I just think is a way to prime people for further restrictions later. But yeah, it was fine, and we had a good time. We made some food. Um, we don't not too many people, and well, not too, like the three of us aren't like huge turkey fans necessarily, so we just like we braised some chicken. That was about it. Made stuffing. What else did we make? Cranberry sauce? Yeah, that's what we made. um the highlight was my partner made a custard pie, which I am a
Ooh.
very big fan of custard. And the custard pie sounds exactly as simple
Custard
as
is
it
great.
sounds.
It's been a while.
It's like it's the simplest thing in the world to make. Like it's just like milk and like heavy cream and eggs and sugar, and that's like, or at
How
least
can it not
that's
be great? Yeah.
it's amazing. It's great. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Like put some vanilla in there and like sprinkle some nutmeg on top, and you're good. Um, but the thing about that kind of stuff is like you have to have good ingredients and you have to make everything from scratch. Otherwise, it's not gonna taste super great.
Yeah.
So we made like our own like pie crust and you know, I was gonna say made our own custard, but like that's like the easiest thing in the world. You just like put it all into a pot pretty much, and eventually it'll set. Eventually, um,
I
but
have a childhood memory of my dad making us custard and managing to burn it. So
well, I mean
not
it.
quite so simple.
I mean, you just gotta make sure it doesn't boil over. That's like the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, just make sure it doesn't boil over because milk will go from nothing to boiling over in 2 seconds. So you just gotta watch
Hmm.
it. Um, but yeah, I'm not gonna say it's like super easy, but you just gotta watch it and make sure it doesn't boil over and destroy your burners and make it a crusty mess. So, but anyway, it is a little bit past 2 o'clock here, so I think we can get Warwick's in on that action. Uh,
Yep. I think Alifen is also around, so maybe they can
oh,
jump
cool.
in with Warwick's. Let's go.
Otherwise, I'll just sit here talking about cooking and baking, and we also, yeah. What you guys, once you're all in that game, let me know and I'll join up. Um, we also made rolls. These is like very particular rolls from like the late 1800s in like Boston. This like one like hotel made them, and it's on like King Arthur Flower's website. And I'm like, what's the deal with these rolls? Like, why are they so special? I'm like going down the ingredients list, and it's just like, nope, this is just how you make rolls. Like, what's so special about this? And then I looked at the quantity for how much butter you put into these things, and it was insane. I'm like, what is going on? And there's like a footnote on the bottom. It's like, for this, yeah, we just have you brush them at the end with butter afterwards. But what they originally did was they just, after they were done baking and right before they served them, they dipped them in butter, like like dipped the whole roll in butter and then put it on a plate and just woo, there you go. Like, oh, that's why people like these things. Whoops. All right, I'm gonna
Okay.
switch over
Looks
to
like
that
Ali
game
and
then.
Warwick's are into a battle already.
Cool, 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 cool. Let's switch over. Spectate that game. Let's go.